Yep, we're good.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Lisa Kaplin with iPEC Coaching. I'm so excited to be here for Unity Week. It's also Coaching Week. That might not be exactly what it's called, but that's the bottom line of what this is. So I'm here today to talk to you about living a joy-filled life. And the reason we're talking about this is because a lot of us were struggling to live a joy-filled life over the last year, and that makes a lot of sense. There was so much going on. I get asked this frequently as a coach. I'm also a psychologist, by the way. I get asked it from all aspects. Can I live a joy-filled life if I don't like my job, or if there's something horrible that's happened in my life, or if I have a long-term illness? Can I live a joy-filled life? Is it possible? And the answer is, it is absolutely 100% possible. There's some ways to go about it, however, and so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. How do you live a joy-filled life, even when maybe circumstances are not ideal? And I think for a lot of us, maybe the last 15 months or so have not been ideal. Maybe you were sick, or maybe you know someone who's sick, or someone who died even, or you lost your job, or you had to take care of kids in a small home or an apartment where you didn't have any help, and you were trying to work and take care of kids, and your kids were unhappy because they couldn't go to school and they couldn't be with their friends, and all of those things that can happen in a pandemic. Not that we would know, because none of us have lived through one before. All of those things that can happen. So what do we do about that? I'm going to take you through three disciplines. That's what we call them. Three disciplines that will help you really figure out how to always live a joy-filled life, no matter what is going on in your surroundings. So before we do that, though, I want to talk about the things that can keep us from a joy-filled life, that can keep us from really realizing our potential, being aware of our circumstances, and we call them influencers at iPEC. There's 6 influencers that really influence how we see the world. So I'm going to tell you those 6, and then I'm going to tell you these 3 disciplines that we really utilize in order to live a joy-filled life, no matter what's going on. So the really interesting piece about these 6 influencers is that all of them, all 6, were in play over this last 15 months, which is pretty unusual. They might have been in play for you individually, but we certainly saw them in play as a society. So here's what the 6 influencers are. The first one is the spiritual influencer. And how this comes into play for any of us is, why am I here? What's my purpose in life? What's my connection to the universe, to maybe faith for some of you? Why am I here? What are my values? What's my purpose? And for many people, for a variety of reasons, the pandemic and all that came with it really push some buttons around this spiritual influencer. We see many people saying, I'm not going to work the way I was working. I want to be with my family more. Or maybe some of you are like, I want to be with my family a little bit less. Either way, no judgment from us. The spiritual influencer we're seeing come into play in organizations. There was a study out a couple of weeks ago that said 40% of the American workforce is considering leaving their job and looking for another job. And the reason that those 40% are thinking of leaving is they said, I'm not feeling connected. I don't feel like this company or this organization understands me, and they're disconnected from their purpose. And that's the spiritual influencer. We often hear it in people asking, why am I here? What's this greater piece of my life? And they're seeking something, and that's a spiritual influencer. The next influencer is the mental influencer. And this is how we think, or what we think. It's really our cognitive functioning. And again, this was dramatically impacted by the pandemic, whether you were stressed and sleeping less, maybe there was a lot of distractions in your home. So it was really hard for you to concentrate. It's our ability to concentrate. It's what happens when the positive mental influencers, what happens when we get a good night's sleep and we have our cup of coffee and we're really clear-headed. It doesn't go so well when we're not clear-headed, when we're foggy, when maybe we're overwhelmed, we're overworked, we haven't taken a break. that mental influencer keeps us from being at our best, being creative, being thoughtful, being patient, kind, all those other things. The next influencer is the emotional influencer, and that's how do we feel? And you can run the gamut of how people have felt over the last 15 months. Scared, terrified, hopeful, happy. The introverts were like having a celebration. Our fur babies having a celebration. Some people were saying, I'm lonely, I'm bored, I'm sitting and looking at these four walls, I want to get out. People were angry. There was a lot of tension in at least the United States around politics, around social justice. So there was a lot of emotions that have come into play. Interestingly enough, I had kind of assumed, and this is what you get for assuming, that as the pandemic was starting to wind down, as we were able to get vaccinations and take our masks off and all those things, that we'd just see a happy population, but that's actually not what has happened. Many people are still struggling. There was a great article out about languishing, that we're languishing, and it's a feeling of kind of like meh. I'm not sure. And so we're finding that people are struggling a little bit emotionally. Maybe it's a little post-traumatic reaction to the pandemic. Maybe it's, I don't want to go back to the way things were. Maybe we can never go back to the way things were. So there's some grief. There's all kinds of feelings going on. So those are the first three influencers: spiritual, mental, and emotional. Then we have the environmental influencer. What's the environmental influencer? It's our surroundings. So COVID was part of our environmental influencer. It could be the weather by you. It could be a flashing light in your office space, or a noise that's like a little distracting noise. It could also be social justice. It could also be the emotional environment around you, not just the physical environment around you. So needless to say, this was so dramatically affected. By the way, the building industry did really well. People were redoing their kitchens and their bathrooms because they were changing their environment or adding some office space. You can't get wood anymore, right? Because people are building decks and doing things because they were home so frequently. So the environmental influencer absolutely came into play. The next influencer is the social influencer. The social influencer, of course, was affected. Are we with people? Are we not with people? We saw people desperately lonely and alone in small apartments where they couldn't go see anybody. We saw people all over the world who were essentially locked in, and we are social beings. And so when that social piece is gone, we really struggle with that, and we look for how can we connect. And Zoom is a nice way to connect, obviously, but it's not being in person. So that social piece has been really affected. I've heard so many people say, I don't even know if I know how to talk to people anymore, not on Zoom. We're so used to it. There was a funny commercial recently where a guy comes out of his house with a nice shirt and his underwear, and his wife says, this isn't a Zoom call, we're with people. So this social piece has so dramatically been influenced, and also the social aspect that many of us see at work, our work friends and how we connect to them, and maybe we haven't seen them in over a year, and that was a big part of our social life as well. The last influencer is the physical influencer. That's really in connection to our bodies. How do we feel physically? Obviously, many people got very sick from COVID. Many people have long-term symptoms and situations from COVID, but also physically, we were more inside than we might typically be. I've been sitting a lot. The first couple of weeks in COVID, I was like, I'm not sure if I actually have taken any steps, because my commute was like 4 steps to the office. So the physical influencer has absolutely played a role. So why am I telling you about these influencers? These are essentially red flags or areas to think about when you're trying to and planning on and wanting to live a joy-filled life. When you figure out which of these influencers are off, and by the way, maybe all 6 have been off for you lately. When you figure out what's off about these 6 influencers, then you can actually figure out what to do in order to live this joy-filled life that we keep talking about. So what we're really looking at here is when we can't change our circumstances, are we doomed to misery? And the answer is, of course not. We've seen people in really outrageously challenging circumstances where they have a permanent illness or disability, or they've lost a loved one or many loved ones, or they've lost their home. And we've seen examples time and again of people living truly powerful, joy-filled, happy lives. How do they do it? That's what I'm going to show you today. That's what we're going to talk about. There's 3 disciplines that we follow at iPEC that really help us to get into a space to choose a joy-filled life. Choice is a key word. It was intentional. So the first discipline is awareness. And this is essentially being aware of what is, what can be, what was, but also awareness of what I'm saying to myself, my thoughts, awareness of my feelings, awareness of how I'm showing up. And there's an internal awareness and external awareness, internal awareness of our internal beings, our internal functioning, and external awareness of our surroundings. If we are only aware and only allow ourselves awareness of 1 or 2 things, we're missing a whole picture of being aware of other possibilities. So let me give you some examples around this. Essentially, we tell our brain what to look for. So if I say to my brain, look for what's wrong, it will, this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong. And it'll tell me everything that's wrong. And then that's where my awareness will be focused. If I tell myself, my brain, if I say, brain, look for what's right, it does just that. And so we have complete power and control of our awareness, even though we don't always feel like it. So let's do a little exercise. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to stop for a minute and take a look at your surroundings. Wherever you are, stop and look at your surroundings and identify everything that you see that's blue. Look around you, everything that you see that's blue. Okay? Give you a minute to do that. All right. So now what I want you to do, you're looking at everything that's blue. I want you to tell me everything that's red in your room. Red, not blue, red. Everything that's red in your surroundings. Now, how many of you were looking for red when I told you to look for blue? You weren't, right? You had selective attention because I said, look for this color, and you looked. So if you are telling yourself to look for what's wrong, you will see what's wrong. If you are telling yourself to look for what's right or what are the opportunities, then you will look for what's right and you will see those opportunities or those possibilities or compassion or anything else that comes up for you. So the first part of this, the first piece of this discipline is to be aware of what am I telling my brain to look for. So let's use an example. Let's say you lost your job during the pandemic. You and a lot of other people lost their jobs during the pandemic. So first you want to be aware of all the things you're feeling right now without judgment. This is really important. So maybe you're aware of, I'm feeling some grief. I'm afraid. I'm a little bit happy. I didn't really love that job. Just recognizing, being aware of all the feelings, being aware of your external response to these feelings, noticing them without judgment. That's the first part. And really acknowledging and validating yourself for anything you're feeling. There's no wrong feelings. There's no wrong thoughts, never. Just being aware of them. Then start to think about, where is my focus going? Where's my awareness going? Is my awareness on, oh my gosh, I lost my job. I'll never find another job. No one will ever hire me. And going into that space, it would be completely normal and understandable to go there, but how helpful is that? So this is where you can choose your awareness. You can choose to say, I want to look at what the opportunities might be of me losing my job. I want to look at this from a different, put on a different color glasses, a different lens, and look at this from a different point of view. So maybe you say, I'm going to think about this. Okay, I lost my job. I'm getting a little time at home. Maybe you're getting a little unemployment checks, not so bad. Maybe you start to think, you know what? I never really loved that job, or I think I'm overqualified for that job. And I've always wanted to try this. And now is my opportunity to try this. And all of a sudden, your awareness has shifted and what you're focused on has shifted. And now you're seeing possibilities. Whereas if your awareness is just focused on what's wrong, you can't see the possibilities because you've narrowed your vision. So awareness. Any questions or comments on awareness? It's a biggie. Hello from Stockholm, Sweden. I'm looking at the chat. Awareness is the first piece. Do awareness. Here's my big coach hack tip for you. Do awareness without judgment, because this is often what my clients will say. Oh yeah, I'm really unhappy about this. I shouldn't be unhappy about this. And no, that's not it. Just be aware without judgment. Just notice without labeling as good or bad, be aware. The second discipline, and this one's a little bit harder. The second discipline is acceptance. So our first one is awareness, and our second discipline is acceptance. And what does that mean, acceptance? It means accepting all of it. What has happened externally, how you're processing it internally, it's full-blown acceptance. And so this is really hard for some people. It's very hard for many of us to accept an outcome. I didn't want this to happen. I didn't want to lose my job. I didn't want to have to cancel my vacation because of COVID. I didn't want my kids to have to move back home, or I didn't want my kids to have to go back to school. And so we get in this place where we're not accepting what is, and maybe we're not accepting our own experience of it. Either way, the minute you get to a place of not accepting, you've shut yourself down and you've limited your possibilities because you've shut yourself down. Linda, I see you're saying you're a neuroscientist in the process of the brain. I love this, that we bias what we want to enter awareness. Exactly, that's what our brain does. It's fascinating. The brain studies are so interesting and so fascinating, and really validate what we do as coaches and how we experience life as humans. So the acceptance piece is, again, full-blown radical acceptance of whatever is. It doesn't mean you might not like it or dislike it. It means I've accepted that this is what it is. So think about a few things around this. What do you accept about yourself and what don't you? Maybe you say, maybe you're short and you don't like that. And you're saying, I don't really accept that I'm short. Well, how are you going to change that? Right? How's that acceptance working for you? And so what would your life look like? Think about this. What would your life look like if you had radical acceptance for yourself and for what is? This doesn't mean we don't try to change things. This doesn't mean we don't try to grow and change our lives in some way. It means we radically accept this. Here's a good way to practice radical acceptance on your children. Seriously, on your children. What if you just absolutely accepted your children for exactly who they are? It doesn't mean we don't ask for behavior changes. It means we accept it. It also means, though, accepting ourselves, accepting any feelings we have, any thoughts we have. I often find my clients being outrageously judgmental of themselves. I shouldn't be feeling this way. I shouldn't be upset. I should be over this by now. They're shoulding all over themselves. So think about, am I shoulding on myself? And what's the opportunity of accepting that anything I'm feeling and anything that has happened is, I can't change it. What do I want to do moving forward? So it's full-blown acceptance. Even more powerful than full-blown acceptance, and here's what I'm going to challenge you on, is accepting without judgment. So often people say, well, that was bad, but okay, it is. All right, I'm still holding you back a little bit. What if you say, this is what happened, and this is how I choose to move forward? What if you truly, truly accepted without judgment? So here's a fun exercise to do. Think about how you can evaluate yourself or a situation without words of judgment, factual statements. So here's an example. Let's do it around COVID. In 2020, there was a worldwide pandemic where millions of people were either sick or died, where people lost their jobs, people had to stay at home for quite a long time. Many things changed in the world. I just laid out facts without any judgment, without this was good, this was bad, just laid out the facts. What if you laid out the facts about yourself without judgment? I showed up for this project. This project didn't go the way my boss wanted it to go. This is what I plan to do in the future. You just laid out a situation without judgment, full acceptance. So this is really releasing our expectations, which often are what holds us back because we expected it to go one way, it goes another, and then we're judging, we're not accepting how it went. So it's also a way to reframe. It's a way to change the way we look at a situation. What could go wrong with changing the way we look at a situation? Nothing. We're just looking at it from a different point of view. What if that different point of view gave us the opportunity to possibly choose a different way to respond or react to that situation? So let's see, I see a question in the Q&A. Let me get to that. The difference between judgment and discernment. Love this question, Lolita, love this. So what's the difference between judgment and discernment? Discernment is stating the facts. This is what happened. Judgment is stating the facts with an opinion to go with it. So let's use the COVID example. Discernment is there was a pandemic. We named it COVID. It infected many, many millions of people around the world. Discernment. Judgment would be there was a horrible pandemic. It was dreadful for everyone in the world. It was the worst thing that could have ever happened. That's judgment. And maybe you feel that way, and that's perfectly okay if you feel that way, and it's understandable if you feel that way. But ultimately, if we can put judgment on everything, think about how it holds us back versus discernment. Discernment is, this is what I see. This appears to be fact. I'm going to check on it, but this appears to be truth. Excellent question. Any other questions, thoughts around our second discipline? So our first is awareness. Our second is acceptance, which leads us to our third discipline, and that is conscious choice. And this is where the beauty lies. And this is where coaching comes in and all the amazing things that can happen in our world. Conscious choice means I'm aware of it all, I've accepted it all, and I'm going to choose what I'm going to do with it. And I'm going to choose it from a place of consciousness where I see what is and I choose. So often we think we're in choice, and it's really an illusion of choice. What does that mean? It's an illusion of choice because we've done something based on essentially an unconscious history. We don't even realize we're doing it, and we've made a choice from a place of fear or anger or resentment or insecurity, so many different feelings. And so we've made a choice from an emotional state that's really holding us back based on our history. So here's a funny example. If any of you know who Johnny Carson was, he was a late night TV host, and he was married, I guess, like 8 times. And everyone who knew him said that each of the wives were pretty similar. They kind of looked the same, and a couple of them had the same name. Johnny thought he was choosing every time, but what really was happening for Johnny was that he kept falling into the same patterns. If you've dated the same kind of people again and again, you're probably not a conscious choice, by the way. No judgment, discernment. You're probably not a conscious choice. Or if you find you're having the same arguments again and again with your partner or your children or the people that you work with, you're probably not in conscious choice. Conscious choice means I've really figured out what's happened here, this whole history of me, and then I'm choosing what I want to do with that. So we can choose from fear, or we can choose from purpose. And purpose is I'm choosing from an awareness of what is, back to awareness and acceptance. And I'm choosing it based on what I see as the purpose of this. So let's use COVID again. I'm aware of all that has gone on from this pandemic. I'm in full acceptance of what it is. I'm going to choose, there's a purpose to all of this. What's the purpose? I got more time with my family. I calmed down. I slowed everything down. I did fall in love with sweatpants, by the way. I'm not sure if that was the purpose, but that happened for me. What was the purpose of all of this, and how can I live in that purpose? All of a sudden, everything shifts from there. I'm not saying the pandemic was good or bad, but there was a purpose for all of us, and we get to choose. We always get to choose how we look at it, either how we show up, how we look at it, how we feel about it. Always. As soon as you get to a place where you realize you have conscious choice about everything that happens in your life, you are in power. 100% in power. You're no longer at the effect of your life. You are 100% at the cause of your life. So there's a lot of things we can't change. Our partners, our kids, sometimes our work environment, but we can always choose how we look at those situations. When you're able to do that, the world's your oyster. Anything can come your way. You're going to figure it out. You always will, because now you're fully in conscious choice. What keeps us from conscious choice? Judgment. Judgment keeps us from this. This is bad. This is wrong. This shouldn't happen. Those are normal feelings to have at the beginning when something happens. And yet, ultimately, if we stay in that judgment space, we won't move forward. Am I wearing sweatpants? I'm not today. I'm not, Russell, but thanks for the question. I love it. How many of you are, right? A lot of us, if you can only see the top half, maybe many of us are in sweatpants, and maybe we consciously chose to be in sweatpants. PJs. I love it. PJs. Another way to help you get into conscious choice is to use a concept that we call holographic thinking. This is a really cool way to look at the world. The holographic thinking is essentially in three parts: logic, emotion, and intuition. 3 parts. All of us tend to go to one of these 3 more readily. Maybe you're an emotional person, you go to emotion right away. Great, nothing wrong with that. Maybe you're more a logical person, you go to logic right away. And maybe you're more of an intuitive person, you kind of respond based on your gut. Holographic thinking really says to really help to get into a conscious choice is to tap into all 3 of these. So if your tendency is to be logical, how are you feeling? What's your gut telling you to do about it? I'm working with a CFO right now. He's so logical. With everything is numbers. He's so logical. So the other day I said to him, how do you feel about that? And he said, feel? What? What are you talking about, Lisa? And so we dug into it and we talked about feelings. And at first we talked about where it might show up physically for him, like my chest hurts, or I get a knot in my stomach, or my neck gets tight. And then he was able to take that to, oh, I'm scared. There's an emotion. Or I'm overwhelmed. There's an emotion. Then I led him to, what is your gut telling you to do? And again, he kind of went, I look at numbers, Lisa. I don't understand this. Now push a little bit. What is your gut telling you to do? And he was able to say, actually, my gut said to look at these numbers, not these numbers. There you go. You pull those 3 together and suddenly you're thinking like a genius. No, your genius thinking is really the truth. And you're in full 100% conscious choice when you're able to do that without judgment. So let me just do a little wrap up here. And if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to ask. So we talked about 6 influencers: spiritual, mental, emotional, environmental, social, and physical. Take a look at those 6 for yourself. Which ones aren't working so well and which ones are? Any of them can be used for us to feel more connected to our lives and more joy-filled, or drain us from that, either one. And then with that, take that and put it into these 3 disciplines: awareness of all of that, acceptance of all of it, and then consciously choose what you want to do from there. Any questions or comments on any of that? PJs are in for sure. So thank you all for being here. Choose a joy-filled life, no matter what is happening in your life. Allow yourself grief, allow yourself all the emotions, accept all of them, accept yourself, accept others, and then choose, choose, choose. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Cynthia. Oh, the last three: logic, emotion, intuition. Logic, emotion, intuition for holographic thinking. Putting all three of those together. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. It was a pleasure on this beautiful Friday morning. Thanks, everyone. It was so nice to have you here. Zach, thanks for your help today. Nice meeting you and your cats. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Be well, be healthy, have fun. Bye-bye.